Welcome to The Author Show, where we feature new authors and books, from fiction to self-help and everything in between. You'll find it all at theauthorshow.com. That's theauthorshow.com. And now let the show begin.
Hi, this is The Author Show, and I'm your host, Linda Thompson. Mark Twain once said, "A banker is a fellow who lends you his umbrella when the sun is shining, but wants it back the minute it starts to rain." Now that quote leads us to our book, The Umbrella Man by Keith Carter, former banker turned author. Keith's story takes the reader from London, UK to Oregon and beyond. And Keith joins us from London. Keith, welcome to The Author Show.
Hi there.
Keith, will you please give us a quick overview of The Umbrella Man?
As you read, the story is about the great bankers' crisis when in 2007 and 2008, the banking system went into meltdown. And I call it the bankers' crisis. Most people call it the financial crisis because actually it was the bankers that caused it. And it's an unusual story because it's written from the point of view of the victims of the crisis, a corporate victim and some of the retail victims, if you like. Because I used to be a banker, I understand banking, and so it's written with a degree of authority. And it's also based on an experience. So at the kernel of the book is a corporate experience I had with a big bank, the Royal Bank of Scotland, which forms the foundation and the base of the story. I end up writing a sort of a thriller. I think you'd describe it as a corporate, oblique stroke financial thriller. It wasn't my intention, but that's just the way it came out. And so the story itself, although it sounds quite dry with respect to banking and the crisis and so on, it's actually quite a page turn.
What served as the inspiration for your storyline in The Umbrella Man?
Actually, although the book isn't autobiographical, the experience which forms the central scene in the book revolves around the handling of the Royal Bank of Scotland, of the small borrowers' accounts and how they mistreated their small borrowers. It's something which actually happened to me. I was the CEO of a company which had a very, very rough time with the Royal Bank of Scotland. And when I first wrote the book, I anonymized the bank because I was concerned that I would say something which would upset them. But as time's gone by, more and more small borrowers have come forward to say how they were maltreated, and some of their stories are absolutely terrible, and were suicides and attempted suicides and bankruptcies and all sorts of unpleasant things happened. And it was all because of the bank's reaction to its position in the crisis. So that's really what got me going. And it was an act of catharsis more than anything.
Well, you were once quoted as saying, "I used to be a banker and then I went straight." Now, I had to giggle a little bit when I first read that. So will you please share your thoughts about why you said this and when?
Yeah, I said it when I began outside banking. I began running a small pharmaceuticals company, and I was interviewed by the Investors Chronicle, which is a very important newspaper for investors. And for small companies, it's great if you've got a good review in the Investors Chronicle. It's a bit like Barron's or one of those publications. And I gave a long interview, and I bought the magazine that week. And this was before the internet. And I was looking through it for my interview, which I expected to be a full-page spread. And it wasn't. It was that one quote. It was the quote of the week. Keith Carter said, "I used to be a banker, and then I went straight." And the fact is that my observation of the banking business, and there's a lot of very, very smart people, a lot of totally honest people in banking, but I came out of the business because I thought it was fundamentally, it was of questionable morality. And I honestly did say that long before it became common to have that point of view. So it's an odd business. It attracts very clever people, but it also attracts a lot of malfeasance. And it's absolutely unique in industries. If you look at it, it's riddled with scandals. But the striking thing is that the scandals are systemic. They don't just cover a single institution. They're all at it. So they're all fiddling the LIBOR, the London Interbank Offered Rate, for example. Or they're all selling insurance, wrongly selling insurance, and not just one. So it suggests something systemic about the industry. And that's it's obviously a tongue-in-cheek quote, but it's heartfelt as well.
Okay. Well, while you were writing The Umbrella Man, were you thinking of who your ideal reader might be?
No, I wasn't. I was writing something which I thought, as I went along, would be A, entertaining, so it would be fun to read, and B, instructional, so it would tell people from a particular perspective the story of, in this case, the banker's crisis, but it would tell a story from a point of view of somebody with the authority of having actually worked in the industry and also had the experience outlined in the book. And as I wrote it, I wrote it for somebody like me. I wrote a book that I would like to read. And I suppose, how do you describe myself? I'm just a sort of middle of the road, middle class, middle brow person, but I have strong views on some things.
Well, Keith, this is your debut novel. Do you believe that any other author may have had an influence on your style of writing?
I sort of hope not, because I'm terrified of plagiarism, of being a plagiarist. So, because I have a horrible feeling that I might read something, find it so impressive that I then I regurgitate on the page as my own words without really knowing about it. So, at the time I was writing it, I was reading. Well, it took a long time to write, so I was reading a lot of books. But the one which most impressed me was Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. And her style is absolutely absorbing. It draws you into the story. And I don't think I've dared go as far as she did in some of her techniques, but maybe that would be one thing. My agent claimed that my writing was a similar style to Jonathan Franzen, which is obviously quite flattering. And when I read Franzen, I've read it before he said that, I can see what he means, but obviously it's not really for me to say that I'm comparable to him.
Well, if you had to compare The Umbrella Man with any other, what would that other book be?
That's a good question. Because of its basis in fact, the way it's written, which is, as I say, hopefully it's easy and light-hearted to read. I think it's a little bit like Michael Lewis's The Big Short and other books by him. Actually, I admire him enormously because he does what I hope I've achieved here, is he writes books about complex, normally financial matters in such a way that it's both absorbing and easy to follow. So, yeah, The Big Short, I'd say.
Will there be a sequel to The Umbrella Man? And if not, are you working on another book now?
No sequel. I am working on another book. It's called Memory: Loss, a knowingly ungrammatical use of the colon, like Mission: Impossible. And it's about Alzheimer's disease, looking after somebody with Alzheimer's disease and the pharmaceutical industry. So it's turning out to be another thriller. Maybe something about me makes me want to write thrillers, but it's going to, when it's finished, it's going to be a very interesting question about the morality and the ethics of euthanasia, the pharmaceutical industry, and how we handle people with Alzheimer's disease, because I'm sure it's the same in the States, but in the UK, it's really, really badly handled, and it's a huge, huge problem because so many people have it.
Wow, that's pretty heavy stuff. So going back to The Umbrella Man, your book takes on some very serious issues of our time, and yet there's quite a bit of humor in it. Did you find it challenging to combine the humorous and the acerbic in your story?
No, not at all. In fact, the more serious things are, this is, I think, an Anglo-Saxon trait that we share with the Americans. I think the harder things are, the more difficult, the more we have a tendency to crack jokes about it in a sort of gallows humor sort of way. And especially if you're writing a book, I think you can slide into a slough of despond and get all gloomy. And that isn't at all a good book to read. I think a good book is one which, you're looking out for the next thing which will make you smile as well as the next thing which will make you think.
Keith, as you were growing up and throughout your career in business, did you ever think you'd like to become an author?
I did. I frequently thought that. And I'm so pleased that it's come to pass. I just hope that we make a success of The Umbrella Men and that I can sell my second and third books as well, because I'd dearly love to do this. Obviously, like everybody else, I don't feel that I can earn enough money at it at the moment to call it a living, but I'd certainly like to carry on writing. And I think from when I was a boy, I was very keen on composing stories and essays and so on. And so it's in some ways a dream come true.
What would you say is the primary moral of the story in The Umbrella Man?
Gosh, can I say bankers are bastards? Can I say that on your show?
Yes, you can.
I'm not sure. I think that's one moral. It's actually that, I mean, I seem to be a bit obsessed by it, but it's continuing. And the weird thing is that the bankers' crisis, which was caused by lax lending and lots of it, and then turbocharged by the investment banking industry in New York and in London. And it caused a huge slump worldwide, and direct cost to taxpayers was in the trillions of dollars. It wasn't billions, it was in the trillions. And if you try to imagine a trillion, it's very difficult. There are so many zeros after in a trillion that it boggles the mind. I think it's 12 zeros. Not a single senior banker went to prison. Not one. Not one. There are some bankers in post, CEOs of major banking companies, who were in post at the time of the crisis and whose banks were criticized and even fined billions of dollars for their role in the crisis. And those men are still in position. If you are the CEO of a company, you should take responsibility when things go really bad. And these guys have got off scot-free.
Well, Keith, will you please read a short excerpt from The Umbrella Man for our listeners?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. What I'm going to read is the prologue, which is actually a scene which genuinely took place. It features in a starring role our own Queen, and she was opening a new building at the London School of Economics in Lincoln's Inn Fields in London, just after the crisis had sort of become a known and recognized problem. So this is the Queen in the prologue to my story. If these things were so large, she asked, gesturing with a gloved hand towards the poster with its colorful graphics showing the speculative causes of hundreds of billions of wayward dollars, how did everyone miss them? Her Majesty the Queen asked the best question. Visiting the London School of Economics to open a new building in late 2008, she turned away from a poster presentation chattily entitled Managing the Credit Crunch and innocently put it to the assembled gaggle of economists, top men in their field, deferential despite themselves. With this, the Queen voiced what millions of her subjects, who would have to pay for the mess, had been wondering. The fawning cluster of economists shuffled uncomfortably, prize-winging schoolboys, caught unprepared by the teacher. One of them was pushed to the front and offered a mumbled answer involving people relying on other people and thinking at every stage that they were doing the right thing. When the Queen responded with a single word, awful, no one was sure if she was passing judgment on the mumbled answer, the man who gave it, the others who stood around looking sheepishly at their shoes, economists in general, the financial crisis overall, or the bankers who'd caused it. She was right, though. It was awful.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So tell me, Keith, where can we learn more about you and where can we purchase The Umbrella Man?
More about me you can get from my publicist's website, literallypr.com. It's literallypr.com. And my blog site is keithcarter88.wordpress.com. That blog actually predates by quite a long time the publication of the book. So you learn quite a lot about me and what I was doing before I was paraplegic and before I wrote the book. The book's available in bookstores through their online presence. I've never seen one on the shelves of any bookstore, unfortunately. I'd be delighted if I did one day. But on the usual online places, you can get the book.
We've been talking with Keith Carter, author of The Umbrella Man. Keith, thank you for taking time to chat with us today and for sharing The Umbrella Man. I'm fascinated by your storyline, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are as well. When you publish your next book, will you please come back and chat with us again?
I'd be delighted to, Linda, and thanks very much indeed for the interview.
Corporate greed, environmental concerns, and much, much more. The Umbrella Man is a witty and acerbic novel for our times. It delves into the current workings of capitalism, miscommunication, causes and unexpected effects, love and survival. That's a lot to think about, and yet I have a feeling The Umbrella Man is a book that you won't want to pass up. And I thank you for listening. The Author Show podcast may be accessed at any time by visiting theauthorshow.com. And selected interviews can also be found on major podcasting platforms such as Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Podomatic, and many more. Are you an author who would like to be featured on our show? Please visit theauthorshow.com and complete the interview request form so that we may contact you. Marketing is seldom easy for authors, and the Author Show is a great way to promote your work worldwide using a high-quality interview that can make a real impact. Please visit our site daily as we continue to introduce wonderful authors of very interesting books on The Author Show.
Thanks for listening to The Author Show. Find out more about authors and their work at theauthorshow.com. Theauthorshow.com. Tune in next time to another great author on The Author Show.